Hey everybody, today we are debating whether or not God exists, and we're starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here. This is going to be a blast as it's been a crazy day, that's for sure, and we are glad that you've been patient with us as we had a slight delay. I think that just in case somebody has their volume on, whether it be Zach or Randolph, and we are thrilled to have our speakers here. These guys are, I can tell you just by speaking to them beforehand, really likable, easygoing, down to earth. I think you're going to enjoy this one, especially if you're a little bit tired out from that slobber knocker last night with IP and G-Man. So, want to mention that each of the gentlemen's links are in the description so that you can check out if you're like, I like that, I want more of that. You can check out their content in the description where they are linked. Also, if this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button as we strive to be. Hopefully we do it well. We try to be a nonpartisan channel. In other words, taking no views on any of the issues, no after shows in which we take a side. We want you to feel welcome whether you are a Christian, atheist, liberal, conservative, Jedi, or even Sith. So, thrilled to have you here. And with that, we are going to jump right into it. So, thanks for being here. And Randolph has noted we will fix his name. It's lowercase for atheist. Thanks for doing that, Randolph. I'm sorry, man. It's been a long day.
Problem.
I appreciate it. So I am going to correct that, but want to let you know Randolph is the president of Canadian Atheists. So we appreciate you taking your time and hanging out with us, Randolph. And we appreciate you, Zach, who actually leads a web page. And it's you guys are co-leaders, right, Zach? Where you guys both, you and forgive me, I'm so blanking on the name.
Carl.
Carl, okay. They lead a website together called Adherent Apologetics. And so, want to let you know about that, folks, which again is linked in the description. So, with that, we are going to let Zach do an opening statement. It's an unorthodox style today, just because we had a gentleman. I think we had a miscommunication. He didn't show up, but miscommunication. I think that he had all the right intentions. So Zach is going to give his opening statement, followed by Randolph, who will then have a discussion where they basically just see where they stand, and that's where they will kind of get into the deep issues on a deeper level, and then we'll do a quick Q&A. So, Zach, I have got the timer set for you, and you've got relatively as much time as you need to do that opening statement, and the floor is all yours.
All right, sweet. Well, I just want to say thank you, James, for hosting this. I want to thank you, Randolph, for joining this debate on just such short notice. You've really taught me that the rumor of Canadian hospitality is real. I got to say, I love Canadians just by talking to you. So this is my first formal debate, I guess we can say. So we're just going to see how this goes. It's funny because I played football for about 11 years and basketball for 5 years. And, right before your season opener, you have this like little buzz and you're like ready to go. And that's how I feel right now. So my hope for everyone listening tonight is just start neutral. Listen to Randolph and I discuss, and I hope that we can contribute in help coming to your conclusion. Humans are often emotional people, and we're going to believe oftentimes what we want to believe, not as what is actually true. I believe in God because I rationally believe that God exists, and I hope you can too. So before I begin on why I believe in God and in theism, I want to make it clear that there are two possible scenarios. Either God exists or God does not exist. Francis Bacon, the founder of the scientific method, said that a little philosophy inclineth man's mind to atheism, but depth in philosophy bringeth men's mind to religion. So there are two plausible universes: theism, where a theistic God exists, or atheism, in which a theistic God, there's different definitions. I know Randolph can talk. He's more of an absence of belief guy, but either a theistic God exists or a theistic God does not exist. Those are the two possible scenarios. So I have 2 points I want to make. And the first point is that the idea of God not existing is logically incoherent. And point 2 is that belief in God is logical. So why is God not existing logically incoherent? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is the universe. If there is no God, there would be no universe. If there was nothing, there would always be nothing. Even atheists such as Lawrence Krauss, who has a PhD in physics from MIT, agree that the universe came from nothing. Granted, he contends that the universe can come from nothing without God, but we can talk about that if that's where the discussion leads. Additionally, the idea of a past and eternal universe, I believe, fails. Infinity is really a placeholder rather than an actual number. You can't, for example, you can't solve infinity minus infinity. Stephen Hawking's final theory said the universe isn't infinite. Mathematicians from Tufts University, Audrey Mithani and Alexander Vilenkin agree that an infinite past is impossible. There is no evidence that, at least I know of, or from all my research, that the universe is infinite, but rather the universe came into existence. We can see this from things such as the expanding universe, radiation afterglow, and other things. If God did not exist, nothing could exist. Nothing cannot cause something. However, there are good reasons to believe that God exists. I want to go through just a few arguments. It's known basically as the cumulative case, the idea that there's a plethora of good arguments that push the idea that God exists. First, I want to talk about the argument from contingency, which says that everything that exists has an explanation of its existence. The explanation can either be from the necessity of its own nature or an external cause. So the main idea of this argument is basically that everything that exists either exists from the necessity of its own nature. For example, let's say the number 4. 4 exists outside of being contingent on something else, or something is, and the other option is something is contingent. So let's say like I'm contingent on my parents. I don't need to exist, but my parents caused me to exist in a way, even though I am an arrangement of atoms, but we can talk about that. So if the universe has an explanation of its existence, the explanation is God. You may think it's a big jump, but I think that the universe doesn't exist out of its own necessity. The universe doesn't have to exist. So there must be an explanation of the universe's existence. And that basically is very shortly the argument for contingency. This is one of many arguments for God. We could talk about the fine-tuning universe and how fine-tuned our universe is. For example, if the initial explosion of the Big Bang had differed by as little as 1 part in 10 to the 60th power, the universe would have quickly collapsed back on itself or expanded too rapidly for stars to form. In either case, life would be impossible as we know it. Calculations by Brandon Carter show that if gravity had been stronger or weaker by 1 part in 10 to the 40th, then life-sustaining stars like the sun could not exist. This would likely make life impossible. So to put this in perspective, there's about 10 to the 80th power of atoms in the universe. It varies from estimates from between 10 to the 78th and 82nd. So I just kind of put the middle estimate there. So if I chose one atom in the universe and asked you to choose the same one as me, the odds of you choosing the same atom as me are better than these two constants just occurring by chance. And these are just 2 examples of fine-tuning. We could talk about morality, the idea that without a higher power, objective morality could not exist, but objective morality does exist. There are many good arguments for God, but I want to focus on one final thing here as I conclude my opening argument, the argument from personal experience. I was driving home with my dad from somewhere a few nights ago, and we're listening to a debate between David Wood and Michael Shermer, 2 brilliant minds on the existence of God. They went back and forth on this topic, and my father, who has really no experience in the idea of apologetics and studying these things, made a statement that really stood out to me. He said this. He said that I think the biggest difference in this debate is that David has had his own personal experience with God, and Michael has not. I think most often the objectors to the argument from personal experience are only people that have not had their own personal experience with God. But for many of us, including myself, God has reached out to us in unexplainable ways. So in short, the argument from personal experience is the idea that people encounter God in ways that cannot be explained by chance. So there must be a higher power which causes these events to happen. I've had numerous of these personal experiences, you could say. I'll just give a short one. I had a couple examples. I want to shorten this because I really appreciate Randolph, and I don't want to take all the time, and I want to discuss. So I'll give you a short one. Okay. Well, I'll give the shorter one that I was talking about. This one actually just happened a couple hours ago. So I just want to say before I talk about this, this doesn't prove that God exists, but I look at it and I say, what's the probability of this occurring in a naturalistic framework? And it's very slim. And so just over the past few hours, let me go back a little bit. Over the past few days, I've been praying to experience and seek God more. So I got baptized today, which is kind of crazy. It's been a crazy day. And when people were praying over me, the man who baptized me, along with another man, prayed the same thing over me. They said that I was seeking God and specifically quoted Jeremiah 29, where it talks about seeking God with all of our heart and we'll find God. So I hadn't told a soul about my prayers recently that I've been wanting to seek God, but I'm certain that it was God confirming that he was heard my prayers, speaking through them. Could it be a giant coincidence? Of course, it's entirely possible. But possible doesn't mean probable. I think it's very, very improbable that those same things happen. And I want to conclude on this, that the idea of a personal experience with God isn't just a me thing. A 2006 Pew Forum study studied charismatic and Pentecostal Christians in 10 countries. From these 10 countries alone, those countries being the USA, Brazil, Chile, Guatemala, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, India, the Philippines, and South Korea. Sorry, not Canada, Randolph. The number of charismatic Christians who have claimed to witness or experience divine healings comes out to roughly 200 million people in these 10 countries alone. In each of these countries, over half of the Pentecostals have claimed to witness divine healings, and additionally other Christians, so we could say Baptists, Presbyterians, any of those things, have claimed to witness divine healings anywhere from 20 to 75% of their respective groups in these different nations. So are all these claims lies or delusions? I think not. That would be 200 million people that have to be liars or delusional. And I don't think that's possible. So there ends a short statement on why I believe God exists. And with that, I yield the rest of my time if I had any to Randolph, and I'm excited. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And we will now move into the open discussion section where they will hash out the issues, see where they agree or disagree. And want to mention really quick, if you have a question, if you put an @ModernDayDebate in the live chat, I will scoop those questions out and we will ask them during the quick Q&A at the end for the speakers. And if you have a super chat, it puts it at the top of the list, and it allows you to make a comment toward one of the speakers that they would get the chance to respond to. So with that, thanks, gentlemen, again for being here, and the floor is yours.
Hey, Jay, wait, before we begin, how long did you say this? I just want to set my timer. How long did you say we're going to be having a conversation?
Is maybe like, Randolph, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I think it should, I don't imagine it'll be very long. It'll be pretty quick. I was thinking of asking Zach how he defines Christianity, and I can talk about how I define atheism and see what comes up from there, and then I can go over the points that he made with him.
You got it.
I have questions about a lot of the points that he's made.
Fair deal. Is like maybe 35 minutes okay?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I mean,
I know it's a short one.
I'm expecting it'll be shorter than that, but
oh,
okay.
Fair enough. No problem. Whatever you guys need, and we can end early. No problem. Thanks, guys.
So, Zach, I guess before we started the show, maybe I'll start with just quickly talking about how I understand atheism, and you can talk about what Christianity means to you and what's kind of required to be a Christian, I suppose. And then perhaps after that, we can go into these points that you raised. There's a number of points there. I've made a bunch of notes, and I have some questions and perhaps some challenges for you with it.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it.
Okay, so I'll just quickly introduce, again, I am the founding president of the Canadian Atheists here in Canada. It's a federally registered organization. We are looking for members. Our website is canadianatheists.ca, that's plural. We are interested in putting an end to the vilification of atheists. There does seem to be a fair bit of that going on still throughout the world, a lot less so in Canada, but my idea is I would like to see it stop completely. I'd like atheists to feel comfortable just saying that they're atheists without having to worry about being vilified for it. The definition of atheism that I work with, and that most of the people I know work with, is that it's just a classification of absence of belief in deities. It is sometimes conflated by people with anti-theism, which is an opposite position of theism, basically that deities don't exist. And while an anti-theist is by definition consequently also an atheist for not believing in deities, atheism doesn't reciprocate to that necessarily. So that's where I kind of fall into the spectrum of things. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what it means to be a Christian, and what are the basic qualifications. I guess belief in the Christian God is a necessary component of that.
Sure. Well, I mean, first I would say I agree with you. Atheists should not be vilified. I think that's a thing that everyone can agree on. I love one of my best friends actually is an atheist. That's really cool. But going back to
Christians and everybody else, just because they're part of a group, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but back to your question. With Christianity, obviously, I think to be a Christian, you have to believe that Jesus rose from the dead, which is really only possible if God exists. So if you're a Christian, you're going to believe that God exists. And I think that for me, what it means to be a Christian, I really look at like the early creeds. So like we could look at like 1 Corinthians 15:3-8, where it talks about, the idea that we believe that we're sinners and Christ died for us and then he rose again on the third day and he was witnessed by the apostles. So I say that's kind of like the basics of being a Christian. Obviously, there's a lot more theological disputes among denominations, but I'd say it'd be safe to say that if you believe that Jesus is God and that he rose from the dead, I'd say that you're a Christian and he died for your sins. Yeah.
That sounds pretty straightforward, and I think it's very common too with various Christians I've spoken to. That's pretty well generally what they say as well. So
Can I ask you a question about
Yes.
your absence of belief in atheism?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I agree with you. Technically, atheism is by definition an absence of belief. I agree with you there. So my question for you is, would you agree to the statement that God does not exist?
So that is one that that's a proposition I can't accept. And the reason for that is because I don't have the tools necessary to explore the entire cosmos or even just the universe to completely and fully rule it out. If you were to ask me about the proposition that any number of deities does exist, I can't accept that one either. And so that's where I am, just not taking a belief in either way.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious where you put yourself on, let's say, a scale. I don't want to force something onto you, but let's say 1 is God does not exist. I'm certain, which I'm obviously, from what I understand, that's not what you are. Or 10 is God exists. I'm certain. Where would you put yourself on that scale?
I don't think I fit on that scale because that is a scale of positions on whether or not deities exist, associated with a confidence value, which I think is a very reasonable scale. I don't have a problem with it. I just don't think I fit onto that one because I don't take a belief in deities either way. And I feel that such a scale would require taking a belief, even if it's only partially. I regard it as if somebody is going to believe in a deity, and you can tell me if you agree with this, they would need to have at least some basic concept of what a deity is in order to believe in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. I just want to add one more thing onto this.
Sure.
So I'm curious because with a lot of things, I mean, let's say like, for example, the tooth fairy. I mean, technically I have an absence of belief that the tooth fairy exists. And of course that's true, but I don't just stop there. I will confidently say the tooth fairy does not exist or Santa Claus does not exist. And I'm curious, I'm sure you'd agree to those statements. So I'm curious why you wouldn't go that far with, let's say, a deity or a theistic God.
Actually, with those, from the standpoint of trying to be a proper skeptic, I would have to say that I have probably well over 99% confidence in the tooth fairy not existing and some other characters like that we've known over the years from various folklore and stories. Again, back to being able to explore every corner of the universe, I couldn't say that 100% honestly because I have not explored the entire, I can't explore the entire universe to absolutely rule it out everywhere. So it's that's where I get stuck, and I can't honestly say 100% it doesn't exist. Although my confidence value is pretty close to 100% because I do consider it to be a story that has been made up by people and it doesn't actually have any real basis in it.
Okay. So
I'm trying to be objective here as best
I know you're totally good. I'm not trying to be. I do not want to be like rude or anything.
No, you're not
like
at
that.
all. Yeah,
Okay,
you've been
good.
very polite. I appreciate it very much. Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm enjoying this conversation a lot.
Me too. So you wouldn't say that you are 100% confident that Santa Claus does not exist?
Well, I would say that I'm very, very close to that because it is known to be a story. So based on what I know about these things, what I could say is if I qualify, knowing the stories that are written, from what I understand of technology, he does not have a sled that can fly around, even though NORAD has, every year they do the Santa tracking and they show where he is in the world. I I would have to say that in the spirit of being a proper skeptic, I wouldn't be able to say 100% that I can rule that out. I'd have to research it further, I suppose. But generally, because I'm close to 100%, I have to say I generally go along with that. That I certainly can tell you very 100% I don't believe it. But I have trouble going so far as to say it absolutely does not exist.
Okay. Well, I mean, I have more thoughts, but I'd love to hear what you say, so we can move on if you want to move on from that.
Well, what more thoughts do you have?
So
You ask me leprechauns, it's going to be the same answer. I can tell
you. So what about leprechaun? No, I'm just kidding. Shoot, I just had a thought and I just totally forgot about it. Okay, we can just move on for now. If I get that thought back, I'll
anytime.
bring it to you.
Sure. Okay. So I think when it comes to deities, you have, would you say you have 100% certainty that the male deity of Christianity exists, or do you qualify this differently?
Well, I wouldn't call him a male deity. I'd say it's God is not male or female. But I would say I wouldn't say 100% because I can't measure and just show you, oh, here, right here, kind of like I can say 100% certain this glass of water is right here. But I mean, whatever the next thing to that would be, like 99.9, kind of 9%, I'd say is where I am with it.
Okay, yeah, you're like me. The confidence value is very close to the top there. Okay, got it. That seems quite reasonable and rational to me as a way of looking at things. So, okay. Did you want to get into the points that I have regarding the points that you've made earlier?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Hey, Jim, I guess our conversation's over and we're going on to questioning points now. So I'm going to be asking Zach about the various points he raised. I guess I'm hoping this will be a very easy one for you to moderate.
You bet. Thank you very much.
You mentioned, Zach, in your opening statement that there are two possible scenarios that God exists or does not exist. And I'm curious, why do you limit that to just one deity? Okay. One God.
Well, so what I'm arguing for is, when I say God, I'm not just I'm arguing for a maximally great being, I guess you could say. So I would say that it'd be impossible for two maximally great beings to exist at the same time, because if you're maximally great, you can't have another being existing with you. So I'm arguing that there's a maximally great being, and I think that it'd be impossible for there to be multiple maximally great beings.
So I guess a maximally great being would not include being able to cooperate with another of equal power and capability, and so does that exclusionary approach somehow fit with maximally great?
I don't think so, because by definition, if it's maximally great, I just don't think that it's possible that there's another. I mean, it can obviously cooperate with other beings, but by being maximally great, it covers everything. So it can't be. There's no. I'm trying to think. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of the best way to word this.
That's fine.
I just say, if it's maximally great, then there couldn't be another being that coincides with it. It'd be impossible.
Okay, so your definition of maximally great means there can only be one, and there couldn't be a number of them cooperating together, as polytheists typically seem to be okay with having multiple deities. You're not okay with that. There can only be one.
Well, I think with polytheism, I think most of those deities aren't maximally great. They're kind of usually created from another god or something like that. But I'm arguing for a theistic maximally great being. So it's only possible that it exists by itself.
Why must it only be one?
Why must it only be one? Well, because if it's maximally great, it means it's all powerful, which means it could not share powerful. It's It's outside of time, so there can't be multiple. If it's outside of time, it covers all of time. So yeah.
Oh, how do you regard time? You regard it as a See, I regard time as something that is not really a traversable dimension, but rather as something that we observe, and we can make markers and we can make predictions on patterns to predict when certain things will happen, and we can see the consistency with it. There's certain consistent things that happen in nature that we can use to say, to put a label on it and say that's time. I don't think of it as something that stops and starts and whatnot. You seem to have this idea that there was no time at some point, and what happened before that? How can there be something before time if time is something that had to get started? Wouldn't there be time in that before time, so to speak?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Seems like a bit of a paradox to me,
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that God is timeless. So that means basically, so we could draw, I mean, if you want to say that the Big Bang, I don't know where you are on this, was the beginning of time. So you draw like a timeline across. Well, I would say God is outside of that timeline. So I don't know if that helps clarify.
Oh, I understand that, and my understanding, just as an aside, is that there were multiple Big Bangs. Stephen Hawking and Penrose apparently updated their the theory explaining this once they added quantum physics into the mix, because apparently it required it didn't support a singularity Big Bang, but multiple Big Bangs to create our universe over time. I guess creating is probably, I'm using the wrong word. I'm not so sure that I even am fully in favor of the idea that the universe didn't exist before these bangs happened. Mm-hmm. So, but a deity outside of time, I'm not so sure I can get on board with that one, because to the idea of change requires that there be an observation of time that passes so that we can notice these changes. So it just seems to me like, how can this possibly work, that there can be something that is not, there is no time when something's happening, and then they can make changes. In order to notice change, some time has to pass so that we can notice, oh, this was then and this is now. So it seems to me like the argument doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't fit with that. Maybe I'm missing something.
Well, I mean, I can try to help clarify here. I don't know if this will help you, but I mean, when I talk about a maximally great being that lives outside of time, it's like I guess you could say like an unmoved first mover. So basically, that being doesn't change. So it's kind of like the idea of that being just always existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder, why couldn't the universe be always existing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, so if we look at, let's say, like, we can look at how like the universe is expanding right now, right? So we could say,
it seems to be expanding, is what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like most of the scientific idea is that the idea that there was the Big Bang, or you could say multiple Big Bangs. So we could draw that into parallel not parallel. Like universes that are like the Big Bounce kind of hypothesis, So are you familiar with I'm assuming
I'm not familiar with that one. Yeah, science is not a strong point for me. I do take an interest in it, but I'm a novice hobbyist when it comes to it. Is how I look at it.
Yeah, same. I can't say.
So I'm probably getting some stuff wrong, and I'm sure people are making mention in the comments, and I haven't seen it.
Yeah, me too. It's probably like, oh, that stupid Christian. I don't know.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I mean, basically, it's the idea that the universe is expanding now, but eventually it's going to collapse on itself, and then there's going to be another Big Bang, basically, and that goes on for infinity, basically. But the way I look at it is, it doesn't seem to me that the universe is static, so that the universe is moving. So something had, so let's say, like the Big Bang caused the moving, and if you want to say, eventually we have to draw ourselves into a point where something caused the first motion. That's the way I would look at it, because if you have, kind of like a pen that stands right here, if nothing moves it, it'll always stay still. But it only starts moving when something pushes it. Granted, that's not what I believe God did, but it's kind of like an example of what I'm trying to say.
Okay. So your position on cause and effect, would it be fair to say that you think it's necessary for everything in the universe, and the exception to that would be your God?
I wouldn't call it in the exception, because then I think that's obviously kind of unscientific in a way. But
Okay.
I would say that the God I believe in, is outside of space, outside of time, outside of matter. So that we look at it, and I think that everything in the material world has to have a cause to come into existence, but something that is spaceless and timeless and immaterial wouldn't have to have a cause of its existence.
And how do people know that that the Christian God has these characteristics
How do we know?
of being outside of space and matter and time and whatnot?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's probably a common thing that you've probably heard before, but I think we look at, let's say, the Big Bang, or whatever caused the origin of the universe, what caused the cycle, or whatever you want to say to get to where we are now. Let's say that, like, I think I look at it and space. Oh, can't speak. Space, time, and matter come into existence with the Big Bang. So whatever caused this thing cannot be composed of space, cannot be inside of time, and cannot be composed of matter. So it's kind of so that's how I come up with the idea of it being spaceless, timeless, and material.
Yeah, I just still don't understand how that means that your God would be outside of those things. And I also would have to say, my understanding is that with science is it's not known what is outside of the Big Bang before it, whatever it initiated from. We don't actually seem to be able to go that far back to know. So it's kind of a wide open field of investigation, I suppose. And it seems that you're jumping to a conclusion that that it must be a deity, must be
Well,
God that did it.
uh, so I wouldn't say that I'm jumping to a conclusion. I'm kind of looking at the data that we have. So we could talk about how, the models break down right before the origin. So we look at the possible, I'm looking at, like, what's the possible scenarios here? Could it have been another universe that caused that universe? But then the question is, what caused that universe? And it goes down.
And I think that's a great question to ask. Maybe something went wrong, or a couple of universes that are incompatible collided, and boom, we have all of this mess. And here we are with stuff all over the place around us, and floating around and making galaxies and whatnot.
Yeah. So I think where that evidence leads is going to come down to an unmoved mover. I mean, obviously, yeah. So
okay, so this is where it seems to me that you're thinking that this must be where it all started from, and so it seems to me that you are thinking that every effect must have a cause in our universe.
Yeah, I think that's rationally demonstrated too. Like, we could talk. I mean, obviously with quantum mechanics, but quantum mechanics is something. The laws of quantum mechanics cause a new particle to come into existence. But I think that in our universe, we don't see a new matter coming in out of nothing, like literally nothing.
Okay, so when it comes to nothing, what are you thinking is nothing? How would you describe, I guess, nothing? Absolutely nothing? Like there's absolutely no properties or characteristics to it?
I would say, like, no matter, no space, no time. There's no laws of physics or anything like that. That's what I see nothing as.
Okay, so because of that, I think that it's very difficult to make predictions about this absolutely nothing if it doesn't have any of those characteristics, because we're unable to really put a definition on it. And because of that, I would, from a skeptical standpoint, have to say that I could not rule out the possibility that things could erupt from absolutely nothing.
Well, do you have any evidence of this?
I just said I can't rule it out as a possibility. As I would say, not impossible is what I should say. Because if we agree that absolutely nothing has no such characteristics, has no laws of physics or anything like that, in a sense, without any kind of physical laws to that we're familiar with in our lives that restrict us from doing a lot of things and also make things work the way they do in what appears to us to be quite a logical way of working. With absolutely nothing, we wouldn't be able to, I don't think we could credibly say that absolutely nothing could happen. It, like, absolutely nothing could, maybe something could erupt from it. But if as soon as you say with absolutely nothing that it would be impossible for anything to erupt out of it, then suddenly we're putting a characteristic, a rule onto it, and then it's no longer nothing. It's something because it has one rule, right?
I mean, so there's multiple things I can look at here. I'd say,
does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean,
okay.
I don't agree with you.
Oh, okay.
Completely, but I see what you're saying. It makes sense. Oh man, why are you so nice? I love Canadians.
Oh, you're a nice guy too.
Appreciate it. But I think possible doesn't mean probable. So I honestly,
right.
I would say,
I'd like to say not impossible.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I get it. So I don't. If there is absolutely nothing, I'll just repeat this, because if there's absolutely nothing, then I think it'd be fair to assume, based off of our experience, that absolutely nothing remains absolutely nothing.
We have experience of this, do we?
Well, I mean, logically, I mean, we don't see things just popping out of thin air. So, yeah.
Well, we're in a universe where there are laws of physics and whatnot. You did mention fine tuning, which I have some problems with as well. But we can get into that later. So, as I think it was Tracy Harris on the Atheist Experience one time was explaining, that scientists don't have absolutely nothing to experiment with. So they're not able to make conclusive judgments about what behaviors could come out of that. What if something possibly could erupt out of that or not?
Yeah, well, I mean,
I think she makes a fair point on that.
Sorry, what did you say there? I missed what you said there.
Sorry, and I think she makes a fair point on that. It does seem logical to me.
Well, I think that, once again, we have to look at it logically. I mean, we obviously, because we live in a universe, we can't experiment on absolutely nothing.
Yeah. I agree with that.
We wouldn't exist. Yeah. We wouldn't exist. We couldn't.
Because we don't have it available to us.
Yeah.
We have a vacuum, but it still has photons and neutrinos passing through it.
Yeah, exactly. But I think to fall. I mean, you may disagree with me on here, and this might be something that we might just have to agree to disagree on. But I think that
I refuse to agree to disagree.
Well, okay then.
Sorry, no, I'm joking. Carry on.
So I mean, I think I just think it's logically, if there's absolutely nothing, if there was absolutely nothing, there would always be absolute nothing. I mean, I know I'm repeating myself.
Yeah, no, you are. And I think that's a common view that a lot of people have. I'm not convinced that absolutely nothing would conform to such a rule. Because first of all, because I don't know if it can conform to if it would conform to such a rule or not. But also by definition, logically by definition, if it is absolutely nothing, then that would mean there are no rules that it conforms to.
Yeah, well,
and that's how I'm looking at that.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I can see what you're saying.
And in a way, this can, in a long-winded kind of way, which I'm going to shorten right down here, is that would also not exclude the slight possibility that an all-powerful and all-knowing deity could erupt from it.
Well, I don't think that this is my belief in an all-powerful I'm sorry.
You're gone.
My belief in a maximally great being began to exist. Once again, I don't think that being began to exist. If that being began to exist, I don't think it'd be maximally powerful. It'd just be kind of like our universe.
Oh, interesting. Huh. Okay, so yeah, your definition of maximally powerful is including that. Okay, yeah, I do have trouble with that, and I still can't accept it. It just doesn't work for me because I'm back to this question of why couldn't the cosmos have always existed?
Why couldn't the cosmos have always existed? Well, I think that, so obviously,
the cosmos containing one or more universes, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that for me, when I look at it, because I've thought about this a lot recently, and granted, I'm no expert scientist like a Stephen Hawking or Hugh Ross, but when
Sure.
I think about it, we look at it and we see our universe in motion. Like our universe is expanding right now.
Mhm.
If the universe was always static, we could, I guess you could, I would say, I guess you could make a case that the universe always existed. But I see the universe in motion. It means that it's coming back in, it's expanding. So if we go back in time, the farther back in time we go, the closer together our universe gets. So it gets together to a point. And if that universe is in motion, I think the question is what caused that motion.
Sure, and I suppose there are many laws of physics that can help with explaining a whole bunch of different ideas on how that happens. So, um, what with the expansion of anything, like there is a reservoir, a watershed somewhere in the U.S. I was just watching a video about recently, and they had a problem with algae and whatnot growing in it. So they somehow came up with a solution of having these black plastic-like balls that are, I think, about 3/4 or 4/5 filled with water. And you know, remember the children's ballroom in shops like IKEA, and we go there and the kids jump around in them. It kind of looks like that, but it's all they're all black, and nothing lives in them because they're all black and no light gets in. And they'll have so many of millions and millions of these balls there, so that they cover the whole top of all the watershed, all the water. And then they don't have a problem with algae growing there. It's easier to filter. They don't have a problem with birds migrating there and using it as a bath. And as the level goes up, the balls kind of spread out on their own and move around. And as the water level goes down, they all come in. It's very slick, and they all keep pretty even because gravity keeps them in check. So I guess this is kind of, seems to me like just a natural thing that happens. And looking at that, if we take it to a larger scale on our whole universe, as our universe, which seems to be expanding, perhaps things will start to move around as gravitational forces change, and maybe that could be an explanation for what kicked it off. It's just a natural process, I suppose.
A natural process. So sorry, can you just? I think I kind of get what you're saying, but can you just kind of summarize what you're saying here? Maybe just briefly?
So I think it's a natural process that, you know, we're in a, think of our universe as a container. It's a really, really big container. Mm-hmm. And as it's expanding, one of the side effects of that is all this matter within it will move around and adjust. Okay. Just like all those balls on the lake, as it goes up and down, they'll adjust and change places.
Yeah, I think I get. Well, I think with that theory, I'd ask you where the evidence is for that theory.
Oh, I just kind of used one example there. Maybe not a directly great example, but I'm talking about how we've got gravitational forces, and when the water level goes down, the balls all kind of come in, and because they're not going to stay up, they got to fall down. They have to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. So. But I'm thinking because things are changing, and as you even stated, we're in a universe that's changing, and I agree with that. Where there is change, you have all this cause and effect going on, and you have you'll see things moving. And with gravitational effects, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is with because of the gravitational forces, we do tend to see things spiral and change. You know, you pull out the plug in a sink or a bathtub that's full of water, and it starts to spiral one way or another. It spirals down, and the water goes down instead of just straight emptying out. So spirals seem to be kind of a natural effect that seems to happen, and on a much larger scale, I'm thinking that's happening with our galaxy and everything being pulled into the center. It's spiraling around instead of just pulling in straight.
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, I think I'd want to see the evidence for that, because I mean, obviously,
I don't have evidence for that one. It's just my understanding of it, and I could be completely wrong on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think that. Well, of course, we could all be completely wrong. You never know. Well, the terrible statement to say. It's possible that that either one of us is wrong. But regardless of that, we
could both be wrong. Yeah, we could both be wrong. So,
well, God both. Well, I guess. I mean, God both can exist and can't exist. That's kind of self-defeat. He either exists or he doesn't. But regardless, I mean, when I look at like a theory like that, I'd say I just want to see the evidence, because a lot of other theories of an eternal universe have kind of failed, I guess you could say, because there's not I haven't seen a model that's supported to reach like a scientific consensus or close to it of
Mhm.
an eternal universe. So I'd have to see the evidence for it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, you just mentioned something interesting, that it sounds like you're saying your deity can't both exist and not exist at the same time.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, if it's a maximally powerful being, would that be a limitation on its powers then, if it was unable to both exist and not exist at the same time?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean,
Hmm.
when we look at all powerful, I mean, it'd be logically, we're looking at something logically incoherent. Like, it's like we're talking about the laws of logic, obviously, which in any possible universe or any possible scenario, the laws of logic apply. Like the law of the excluded middle. Either
Sure.
God exists, a maximally powerful being exists, or a maximally powerful being does not exist.
Oh yeah, with the proposition that's you're looking at that law of excluded middle. Okay. Um, and that's kind of how it is with a lot of things. It's just the only options are true or false, in a setting of reality. Um, so I guess what this sounds like, you're also presuming that your God is having to comply with the laws of logic in the universe.
I wouldn't say in the universe, because the laws of logic are transcendent. They
Everywhere.
don't just apply to our universe. They apply no matter
Okay.
what.
All right. So maximally powerful would mean that uh, there is a restriction, and that restriction would be compliance with the laws of logic.
Um, I get what you're saying with that. I still don't think that changes the fact that I'm arguing of a maximally powerful being. Because I
Okay,
mean,
I'm just trying to understand maximally powerful here, because you're saying maximally powerful, and I think there are some people who will think that God is above the laws of logic, and then there's others who take a more reasonable approach in saying no, they wouldn't be.
yeah, I mean, well, I think that
So your
three.
definition of maximally powerful will seem limited to somebody who thinks that laws of logic wouldn't necessarily have to apply to a God.
Yeah. Well, this is something I'm not completely certain. I'll have to research and get back to you. This kind of goes
Okay.
back to this is something that kind of goes back to the idea of, I was just looking at this recently, like, can
It's something to
God,
think about.
yeah, it's something to think about. But I would think that the laws of logic are, they're transcendent beyond our universe. So of course, three will always be three, regardless of, you can't change that. So I mean, if you want to say God can't change that, then I mean, I'd say you're right.
Okay. So what I'm hearing there is that there is some kind of restriction on God's power. Then he cannot break the laws of logic.
Well, I wouldn't call it a restriction, because I still think that he's
But he
all
has to
powerful.
work within the laws of logic. What he has to do has to be logical.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my question for you. Where did the laws of logic come from?
They didn't come from anywhere. They're transcendent.
They're transcendent. It's always been there. So God didn't create them, though.
Well, I think without God, there'd be absolutely nothing. And I get what you're saying.
Okay. Yeah. Alrighty. I find this whole thing very confusing. So.
It is a little, yeah.
I like.
This is one of those things where I haven't looked into this in depth. So there's people that obviously would know a lot more than me. So this is something I obviously have to dive into more. So I don't want to sound like a heretic to the Christians.
No. That's not what we're trying to do here anyway. So you did mention infinity minus infinity is not possible to calculate. Am I understanding that correctly from your opening statement?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Okay. As a single operation, as a single transaction, infinity minus infinity, that would not be zero.
I don't think so, because
it's conceptual.
It's concept exactly. I agree. I see what you're saying, but I mean,
I think I agree with you, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to explore that a little bit because I think it was kind of fun.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
So one intriguing point was you're saying that the universe didn't have to exist.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. Do you think that it's necessary that your God has to exist?
Yes.
Okay. Always?
What do you mean by always?
For eternity. Your God will always exist. It's eternal.
Yes.
Can your God bring an end to itself? Does it have enough power to do that?
This is one of those like questions you were talking about earlier. I mean, I'd say no. I mean, it's all
Okay.
powerful. It can't. Yeah.
So that would be another thing that the maximally powerful deity cannot do.
Well, this is another one of those.
I'm not trying to be tricky here. I'm just trying to understand maximally powerful, because it sounds like cannot break the laws of logic, cannot end itself, and break out of eternity.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
this is another one.
I'm very curious about this. Okay.
I looked into this a while ago. I forget most of my research. This is another one of those things that there's good answers to this. I can't remember them off the top of my head.
No problem.
So
No problem.
with like that and laws of logic, I mean, I gave what I can remember, but
Sure.
I think it's just something that that I've seen that I believe there's good answers to. I just don't know them off the top of my head, so I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. It's fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Fine-tuning argument. One of the problems I have with that is we don't have other universes to compare with to come up with an idea of what there could be possible ranges on what we consider to be constants. So we don't even know if they're tunable.
Well, I think that that they could be just completely like the constants could be different. Like the way it was, at least in a naturalistic framework, it's completely whenever our universe originated, it was by chance, whatever those constants were. This is kind of one of those things that I'm not going to be an expert on, so I don't know how much you know, but
I don't know a lot. I'm looking at the logical, philosophical kind of considerations on this.
Yeah.
Trying to understand. Okay. So that's something that would I guess you're going to be looking into more as well. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't mean to make you busy.
No, it's all good. I've been wanting to I want to look into these things a lot deeper. Obviously, I just wanted to, I don't have. I'm not going to act like, oh yeah, I know all the answers. I don't.
Oh yeah,
I don't have all the answers.
You're striving to be objective about it, and I think that's wonderful. And I think more people should try to. The objective morality one is kind of a big one. This one seems to come up a lot. I'm not a proponent of objective morality. I don't think that it's possible, and the reason for that is because I've not encountered any examples where everybody agrees on something. Like, to me, an objective moral value would be like a law of physics. It's something that you can't deny. It's there. That's the way it is, and it's just 1 + 1 is 2. That's something that is all agreed on generally by rational people. So, objective morality. Do you happen to have an example of an objective moral that everybody would agree on?
That everyone would agree on, like everyone in the entire universe?
Yeah, everybody would end up having to agree on it. Yeah.
Well, I don't think everyone agrees on certain things being moral. That doesn't change if it's objective or not. Like, we can disagree over, let's say, like abortion. Is abortion moral? But at the end of the day, I believe that objectively there is an answer. It doesn't matter if people disagree. We can look at, I'd say, like, let's give a more general example for, like, let's say murder.
Abortion's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I take the position that, and I consider all my positions on morality to be subjective. I don't consider any of them to be objective. I think that you and I could have an agreement on something subjectively, and then because we have agreement on that, we can make objective determinations, but it doesn't make it overall naturally objective. So, like, when it comes to abortion, I favor the freedom of bodily autonomy as a human right, and so I think really it's whatever the reason is, or if there's no reason at all, the right of a pregnant person to end the pregnancy is entirely their choice and their right, and there should be no pressure on it. But I do know that there's a lot of people who disagree with me on that, and I suspect you probably do too.
Yes, I do. I mean, this is obviously, I think this is a different debate, obviously.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean,
I'm just trying to get at objective.
I was trying to give
use
something
that as an
that,
example.
I was trying to give an example where people disagree on whether something is morally
Sure.
right or wrong, I guess you could say. But I'll just transfer it to a more general idea.
Yeah, sure.
Because let's say murder. Because I mean, I'm sure you agree that.
Say which?
What?
What did you? I broke up. I didn't hear you.
Sorry. I said, I'm sure you would agree with me that murder is wrong.
I would agree. Yes. There are people who do disagree with it, though. And there's even the Amalekites in the Bible were killed, or the story of flooding the planet and killing a lot of people and animals. Pretty much everybody on the planet who really didn't do anything at all, from my own discernment. Or we take a look at Abraham being ordered by God to kill his own son. There's an intent to commit murder there. How could Abraham, if this is an objective value, then how could Abraham go and carry that out?
Okay. Well, I mean, there's a couple different topics you're talking about here. We could talk about.
I'm giving a couple. Pick whichever one you want.
We can talk about the idea of the Old Testament and like what's going on there, morality. But I was talking more like in general, murder.
Okay.
We
can
get
into specific examples. Sorry. Yeah.
We can talk about that if you want, but I mean, I was trying to focus more on objective morality because that's more what this debate is. So I look at objective morality and say murder. Obviously, there are people that are going to disagree that murder is wrong. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I sound terrible now. The people would disagree and say, you know what, murder is okay. We look at that and we look historically, there really aren't any societies. There aren't many that say you can kill for no reason. We can say that people's killing was for a bad reason, but they still give a reason. Murder, it's just, so they would say it wasn't murder. We'd obviously most likely agree that it was murder. But most of the time in societies, you can't just kill someone because you feel like it. We could argue about whether their justifications were right or wrong, which obviously most of the time, especially in the ancient world, they were wrong. But it still doesn't change. Oh, I just lost my thought. I'm sorry.
In the U.S., they have a number of states have capital punishment. We don't have it here in Canada. I consider capital punishment to be a form of murder. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's different ways you could look at what murder is. With capital punishment, I don't really want to get into my views on it. I mean,
sure. Okay.
It's a complex topic that I haven't looked into.
I'm trying to give an example of where people even justify it under the law, and I still consider it wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think what I'm talking about is something, let's say.
So what would be the objective moral value on capital punishment?
Okay. So let's say, for that, people would say, hey, we're killing with justification. But I'm saying universally, when we look at it historically, I could be wrong, but I don't think there is a society that says that you can kill someone for no reason. I mean, obviously we can talk about like you believe that the justifications for capital punishment are wrong, but there's still people giving a reason for why they're doing it. So I'd say that there is no society that says that you can kill someone for no reason. And it kind of leads towards an objective truth that their murder is wrong. Killing someone for no reason is wrong.
So, and then that has to be qualified then. So it kind of, when it comes to ending a life, it's there's conditions attached. There's strings attached. It doesn't sound so objective to me now.
Well, I'd say that the objective truth of killing someone for no reason is wrong in every society.
Sure. And would that include somebody killing someone accidentally?
Manslaughter? Well,
yeah,
that's a tricky one. You can't say.
Yeah, obviously, this is the problem with objective morality. There's all these exceptions.
Well, we can debate this, but it still doesn't change the fact of whether something. I mean, obviously, I believe in God, so I believe there's objective morality. But we can debate over whether something's right or wrong. But it doesn't change in the objective sense whether it is right or wrong. Like, that's why I went back to the idea of abortion. Like, we can argue over whether abortion is objectively, or
Yeah.
we can not objectively, we can argue of whether abortion is right or wrong, but it doesn't change the idea that objectively abortion is either right or wrong. Or, yeah.
Yeah, so this is where agreement on a standard is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the standard that you're basing it on, would you say is Christianity?
I would say so. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I do have problems with it. I don't think it is. I think there are the examples I mentioned before are examples of things that are wrong with it, and so I disagree with it. So it's I'm not convinced that it's actually okay to flood the entire planet and kill every living being, almost all living beings on it.
Okay. Well, obviously, this is kind of, there are Christians that argue over whether it was basically on the Hebrew wording, whether it's the entire planet or it was part of the planet. But
Okay. Okay, even part of the planet. It was a major part of the planet, according to the story.
Killing people. Well, I think that we look at like when these when people die in the Old Testament, when an army, when the Israelites would kill someone or something, like, for example, like this, it's not like they're just killing innocent people. Like, so for example, we could talk about, so I'm not super familiar with The Walking Dead, but I've heard this analogy before. Okay. So
I'm not familiar with it either. So we're in the same boat.
I've heard the analogy. So just follow with me. So basically in The Walking Dead, there's this group of people that the whole show is basically like there's zombies everywhere and people are trying to survive. Right. So these group of people that harbor people into their society to try to protect them. They say, hey, we'll protect you from the zombies. Just come stay with us. And what happens actually in the society is that they say they'll protect them, but then they'll disarm them and then they'll cannibalize them and eat them. Okay.
Okay.
Are you following with me? So,
and that's been found, I think, by archaeologists have discovered evidence of that happening with ancient tribes. And I think Sigmund Freud even talked about these different tribes doing it. Some of them would eat the dead because they believed they would inherit some of their abilities. So if a big, muscular, strong guy passed away, then everybody in the tribe would want to eat a piece of them so they could become big and strong like them. And then there were others who would, other tribes had completely different view on it, where they would kill off an enemy and then they would eat the enemy so that way they can't rest and go to the afterlife. There's all kinds of different views on it. So, and I think Christianity, my feeling on that is that when it was first promoted, and you have the concept of eating the bread and drinking the wine to simulate eating Jesus' flesh and drinking his blood, is to appeal to people who were kind of in the first kind of tribe I mentioned, and get them to switch over. Possibly there's a bit of marketing there. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, before I go there, I just wanted to finish my story.
Sorry.
Here.
Yeah,
So, you're fine. It's no problem. It's no problem. So basically, so there's these people, and then there's this like one group of people that come in and they figure out what they're doing, and I've never watched the show. I've just heard the story, and they escape somehow. So these people escape from this society that's cannibalizing and eating people in this show, and so.
Yeah.
What's the moral thing to do there? Is it to let society go and keep cannibalizing people, or to not kill them? So basically,
or another option to try to get into a leadership position there and change it.
Sorry, I lost what you said there.
Or another option might be to get into a leadership position and change it. So there are multiple options, but I get your point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that it's not when this kind of goes into the Old Testament, is it's not just a leadership thing; it's a culture issue. So to solve the culture issue, unfortunately, you have to take out the culture. And if we want to translate this into God, so let's say that God exists let's say, in that the things that happen in the Old Testament, let's say like the Amalekites or the Canaanites, they happen. So God is the life giver. So I think it's fair to say that God could be the life taker, because if God exists, we're physically dying in this realm, but we're just changing locations if God exists.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's. I mean, I'm sorry.
No,
I
no.
don't want to kick you off. You go. I was going to say, I mean, we could keep talking about this, but that's kind of not the topic. We're talking more about does God exist? And this is kind of going into
Yeah,
is
it's
God
gone
evil,
off.
things like
Okay,
that. So
yeah,
I'd
then
rather move on.
let's move on. Okay. So yeah, it's a tricky one too for me because I got in last minute on this. So
Yeah, I appreciate it so much.
yeah.
It's
I appreciate you following along with this kind of stuff. The objective morality one is I can go on and on. Boy, are you convinced that like I think it was interesting in your original opening statement that you're saying the universe isn't necessary. Um, Similar to that vein, you stated that there must be a higher power. And am I understanding you correctly on that?
that the universe doesn't have to exist.
Well, no, that you already clarified that you did say that it's not necessary for the universe to exist. I'm wondering, it kind of ties into another statement you made, I think, later in your opening statement was that there must be a higher power.
Yeah, I think that it's necessary that there must be a higher power.
Okay, and by higher power, you're meaning God.
Yes, a maximally great being.
Yeah, maximally great being. Yeah, and so what necessitates that in reality?
What necessary?
What necessitates that there must be this maximally great being, this higher power, this
Okay.
God of yours? What necessitates that?
Okay.
What makes it necessary?
Okay. So would you say that it's possible that God could exist theoretically?
I'm not going to go quite that far because I'm not convinced of it, but I will go as far as saying I can't rule out it being not impossible. I can't rule it out being impossible.
Okay. Well, I think let's say theoretically it's possible that a maximally great being, or we can just shorten it.
Hypothetically, sure, I'll go along with that. Yeah.
So hypothetically, in one possible world, a maximally great being exists. Well, I think it's fair to say that if in just that one in that one world, a maximally great being exists, that's not a maximally great being if it only exists in one world. A maximally great being would have to exist in every possible world. So that's why I would say that it's necessary that a maximally great being exists.
Every possible world. So this is, again, looks to me like imposing a restriction on all the possible universes. I think you meant possible universes, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So basically the restriction that's imposed on every possible universe is that there must be a maximally great being. And I'm wondering, why is that?
Well, once again, I was just trying to follow you through my logic. And I think if it's possible that a maximally great being exists, then I think you could say that in a possible world that it exists, then we can conclude that it wouldn't be maximally great if it only existed in one possible scenario or one possible world.
Oh, it's because of its characteristic that it's maximally powerful that it has to. That's what necessitates existing everywhere.
Yeah. Its character, yeah. If it was something, a material being, I guess you could say, it wouldn't have to exist. That's why, because of its characteristics, I think that it would have to exist.
If your deity, if your God was not wanting to exist in a number of different universes, would it have that option?
Once again, I think we're going to this topic that I told you about before that I don't think I need to research more, the more theoretical things. I can.
So it's an unknown. Okay. So it's an unknown. All right.
Well, I wouldn't say it's an unknown. I just say I haven't. That's one of those things I have to brush up my research on before I could get back to you on that. I'm not.
Well, you're basically saying that you don't know, and it's okay to do that. It's an honest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I would say I don't know, but I think that there's answers on the Christian side. I just forget what they are.
Sure. Okay. So with that, I would say it's because you're at a point of saying I don't know. That doesn't help your position.
Yeah, I'm not saying I don't know. I mean, I personally don't know, but I think that there are answers from the Christian side. I just don't have them off the top of my head.
Okay, and you're asking about and with this higher power, have you taken the steps to eliminate other possible options, other alternatives to it? Like, there's no other possible alternatives to this. This is the only thing that can be.
I think I need.
It's this maximally powerful God of yours. It has to be of Christianity. It has to be. You're saying it's necessary everywhere. Have you ruled out the possibility of other alternatives?
Oh, you mean like other religions?
No, not necessarily an alternative to this maximally powerful being. Like it could be something completely different to it instead that could take its place. That's not a being, but maybe something else, like a set of natural laws or something else. Have you actually taken some steps to rule that out?
Well, once again, I think we'd have to ask where those laws would have come from because they're not maximally great. And I think if it's not maximally great, it would have to come from something else. I don't think something that's material or let's say a physical. Obviously, I think the laws of logic are a little bit different. But
Okay.
once again, sorry, this is not an area of my expertise, so I'd have to
No problem.
get some of these things and get back to you.
I'm just asking based on what you said in your opening statement. That's what inspired me to ask these questions.
Yeah, it's no problem. I would say that it's not possible. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're taking a position that it's not possible that there be any alternative to your God being the creator of everything.
From what I understand with the current evidence that we have now, yes.
Okay. So would that mean that you're still open to other possibilities if something was later discovered?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that if we say discovered something like an eternal universe,
Mhm.
I would say, okay, well, it definitely would take a hit on the idea that there is a maximally powerful being. Sure.
Okay. So, okay. So I think that sounds to me like there's a little bit of doubt there. You're open to that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm doubting. I would say obviously I would say it's possible that I could be wrong, but
Oh, this is good. Good.
Yeah, it's possible, but is it probable? I think it's very, very, very I don't want to sound like rude here, but I think it's very.
You're almost 100% confidence value.
Yeah, I'm like yeah.
That's where we're at. Okay.
Yeah.
So, alrighty. You asked about you asked in your opening statement, what's the chance of the universe occurring, and then you said that it's extremely slim. And I'm wondering how you know that to be the case.
I'm talking about with these couple constants right here.
Okay.
So I was talking about the possibility of these two constants occurring randomly or by chance. So so the one, it differs by 1 part in 10 to the 60th power, and one if it was any different by 1 part in 10 to the 40th power, then these things cannot exist. So if you multiply the two, it'd be 10 to the 100th power. That both of those I have to double. Yeah, that'd be right math. So yeah.
So where do you get those numbers from?
That was from my research. I'd have to. I mean, if you want sources on them, I could get back to you on that.
Well, I'm not asking. Sorry, I'm just trying to generally understand how those numbers are justified as the right numbers to use in making this determination. Because here we are in this universe that 100% occurred, as far as we're perceiving.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you just.
So yeah, if you know this, these numbers that you're putting out there, they're
Yeah, I think we just lost Randall. Hello?
statistical probability kind of considers me. Okay. All right. So these sound like statistical probabilities. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. So basically what these numbers are is obviously I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say that I'm just going back to my notes here. Sorry.
Okay.
Let's say gravity, the force of gravity. Let's say it's, I don't know. I don't know the actual number on this, but let's say it's 25, whatever. Like I said, I'm not an expert on these things, so I'm just kind of trying to reason through it. So let's say it's 25. So basically the argument is if the universe, it doesn't have to be 25 because we look at if it was different, if it was just different by 10 to the 60th power, to the negative 60th power, more or less than that number, let's say 25, then the universe would have collapsed on itself or expanded too rapidly for life to exist.
Okay. And how do we know that that's what would happen?
I think it's obviously, I don't know this personally, but it's based off mathematical models from scientists.
Yeah, I'm getting back to, we don't have other universes to compare to, so I wonder how we could possibly know this and test this and understand it. And when we're looking at different planets, we see stronger and weaker gravitational forces on them. It seems to compound, and if it's off by a tiny bit, I'm not so sure. If we're expanding, maybe we're expanding at a much faster rate than a minor difference like that would even have any impact on.
Well, it's more about it's the models that I'm pretty certain it's the models that these scientists are running, and they're saying, hey, if we put this number at this in our model, the universe expands too fast or collapses on itself. So yeah,
that's something I'll have to look into then, because I find it curious that these numbers would be thrown out there, and that it's even considered that this could even be changed.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Wait, before we continue, hey James, what are we looking at with time?
Why don't we do that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
I just want to
hosting this, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for Randolph on coming for short notice. I really appreciate you and your awesome Canadians.
It's been a pleasure talking with my neighbor Zach.
Yeah, likewise.
USA.
Likewise, James. I just want to have my time. So I'm just following. How long are we gonna do Q&A for?
Maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah, that works.
Are there a lot of questions?
There are a good amount, so we will
fantastic.
move
Great.
fast. Thanks for everybody's questions, and thanks Randolph and Zach. Thanks for being here. It's been a pleasure. And so Brian Stevens, thanks for your super chat. He said, "Is personal experience with Allah proof of Allah?" I think that's for Zach.
Yeah. So, in my argument right here, what I'm talking about is the idea that personal experience shows that there's something more than just the world we live in. So I'm arguing for a theistic personal God. So then you could say, I look at these things from personal experience, and I'd say, hey, it's probably true that there's something more than just the natural realm, and it's probably true that God exists. And from there, you'd have to use discernment, look at different resources in terms of Christianity, Islam. You have to discern who is this theistic God. So it doesn't take you all the way straight there, but it's a step towards theism, and then eventually you have to discern what's true.
I'm curious, Zach, do you, because I've encountered some people who think that Allah is actually the Christian God in disguise, and others are just misinterpreting. What do you think about Allah? Is it the same as the Christian God, or is it different? Or
I think it's different. I think we both
is it
believe
as powerful as a Christian God?
Muslims believe, yes, but I think that I think this is obviously a little bit of a different debate.
Yeah. I'm just curious your opinion on it.
It's like almost midnight here. My brain's kind of slowing down a little bit.
Sure.
So yes, we both believe in a theistic, all-powerful God, but we believe differently on who that God is and how he's expressed himself.
Okay, so there isn't actually full clarity on exactly what this God is like then.
I mean, we can't prove that the theistic God that exists is the God of the Bible. We have to use reason to deduce it. But I think we should move on with some questions. I'd love to discuss this another time. So yeah.
Thank you for saying that, by the way.
Okay.
You bet. Thanks for your question. And next up, Brian Stevens, thanks for your super chat. He said, Mormons personally experienced the angel Moroni. Do you believe them and accept this personal experience as evidence for Mormonism?
Once again, it's kind of the same thing I was just talking about. It's about discernment. And when I was just talking about personal experience, I'm talking about the idea that simply a theistic God exists. And then from there, we have to deduce. So, I mean, if you want to say, we'll have to talk about what was that experience? What was it like? Things like that. Because, yeah. So it's kind of the same answer I had at the beginning. My argument is more towards theism, and then we have to reason further past that. So, yeah.
You bet. Thanks so much. Speeding through just to get through as many as we can. Chongo, Thanks for your question. We appreciate it, Chongo. He says, does he have a solution to self-titled Chongo's Dilemma, which is Chongo's Dilemma states if God is energy and calorie is unit of energy, is a low-calorie diet a godless endeavor? I didn't realize that was a troll question.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, please read the troll questions. They're great for a laugh. I love them. That's great.
Thank you for that, Shango. Next up, emotionally stunted emoticon. Thanks for your question. They said, at Zach, how does a non-physical entity like a god or soul perceive things like light and sound, or how can they even process and transmit information for that matter?
Okay. Well, once again, this is a little bit out of my expertise, so I won't give you the best answer out there, but I'll give it the best I can. So once again, I'm arguing for an all-powerful being, and an all-powerful being would be able to understand these things. In short, obviously, there's a lot more you could get into, but that's not my area of expertise. But I will look at that in the future.
So much. Next up, thanks for your question, the Crawdaddy 029. Appreciate it. He asked, Zach, did you or can you prove or disprove Frank the God-eating frog?
What?
I think it's like a flying spaghetti monster type thing. Like, can you prove or disprove that?
You know, I think a good response is to say that there's competition from the Mexican staring frog of southern Sri Lanka. You've seen that on South Park, I'm sure. Yeah, I think Zach has.
I've actually never watched that show, but I kind of get what you're saying. Well, we gotta get some questions for Randolph. Well, I'll answer that question. Once again, I'm arguing for a maximally great being. You could say that maximally great being, you could call it the flying spaghetti monster if you wish. But there's, like we said in the beginning, there could only be one maximally great being. So yeah, if you have a different perspective on who that is, well, let's reason and see what makes the most sense.
You got it. Thanks so much. Praise I am that I am. Thanks for your question. He asked, who or what made atheists the arbiters of the existence of God? If you want to answer that, Randolph, I guess it's for you.
I don't consider atheists to be the arbiter of the existence of deities. We just don't believe that deities exist. So I think if you've encountered somebody who's claiming that atheists are arbiters of whether deities exist, that's a mistake. That's possibly somebody who's got wrong information about what atheism is, or they are purposely trying to mislead you. It is certainly not consistent with any definition.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. And we just had a super chat come in. NANA. Thanks for your super chat. They say there is no God, only Zool. So thanks for that. I'm pretty sure that's
Ghostbusters.
I was just gonna say that's a Ghostbusters reference.
That's fantastic.
I love the Ghostbusters. That's terrific. Thank you.
Was it the gatekeeper or the keymaster? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. That's
a fantastic movie.
Yes. So, Mind Onion, thanks for your question. They asked for Zach, if everything has a mover, what causes radioactive decay?
I'll have to look into that. Honestly, I haven't studied radioactive decay that thoroughly, but I mean, I believe it's a natural process. So it came into existence by the laws of nature.
I think so. I agree.
Thanks so much. Totally appreciate it. Next up, thanks for your question, Canderman. He said, to Zach, is God subject to any sort of quote-unquote time? If not, how is thinking or action possible for God?
Well, once again here, obviously God isn't in time, or that wouldn't be God. So I would agree. I would say that God is outside of time. Like if you draw a timeline, I would say God is. This isn't a perfect analogy, but it gives you a little bit of an idea. I'd say God is the piece of paper that surrounds the timeline. That's obviously, it's not perfect, but that's the best off the top of my head at midnight example I can give you.
Bet. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. Next up, appreciate your question from Iron Charioteer, a regular. Yes, ask Zach in. PR. That must be Proverbs 30 verse 5. Every word of God proves true, but in 1 Kings 22:23, 2 Chronicles 18:22, Jeremiah 4:10, Ezekiel 4:19, God deceives some of the prophets. How can someone trust God?
How can someone trust God? Well, once again, I think it comes down to discernment. We have to look at those specific examples of who is God deceiving? Why is he deceiving? He doesn't just deceive I don't know if there's an example of God just lying. There is no example. God cannot lie. I'd have to look at those things more in context to give a good answer. That's the best I can give you right now. So if you want to email me, I can look at those things and I'll put some stuff out on it in the future. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks for that question. And Pants L. Jones, thanks for your question. They say, Randolph, what is your purely immaterial metaphysical proof that the material world exists?
I don't have any. This is I rely on my perceptions of reality as I know it. I've found them to be quite reliable. If this is a simulation, it's a pretty darn good one. That's probably the most that I can say about it. I don't have an answer for it aside from that. I'm sorry.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Immutable Destiny, thanks for your question. They ask, for the theist, how does a timeless... His name's on the banner. For the theist...
It's Zach.
For the theist... It's all right. For the theist, how does a timeless, non-material entity interact with a physical world? And 2, if it is a supernatural mechanism which can be explored physically, is it truly supernatural?
Well, I mean, if you define supernatural as define the laws of nature, then yes, it would be supernatural. Can you read the first part of the question again? Sorry.
You bet. No problemo. It's, how does a timeless, non-material entity interact with the physical world? And then they're asking, like, what's the mechanism? And if it's a mechanism that's, like, physical, that can be explored physically, then is it actually a supernatural explanation?
Well, no, the mechanism isn't a direct physical thing, or it'd be a material being and not all powerful, a maximum great being. So, I'm sorry, it's like I can't completely follow. So yeah, that's kind of what I have right now. I'd have to.
I think they're. I think they're wondering how a god outside of time and matter and space can interact in time and matter and space.
Okay.
And the mechanism is for that to happen.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I'd say that if a maximum great being created time, space, and matter, it'd be powerful enough to create it. So it'd be powerful enough to interact in the world.
We only have a few more questions, so hang in there. And Bunny 2007, thanks for your question. He or she asked Zach if he has medical evidence from physicians of the faith healings he spoke of in his introduction.
I don't have any on me. I mean, I can look into this more thoroughly. I know that they recently published within, it was a couple months ago, a peer-reviewed medical journal, and there was something with the gastrointestinal, and there was nothing that happened. They're like, nothing that happened. This is me talking at night. And they said, hey, this is a miracle. Like, the best explanation, and really the only explanation we have, is that it was a direct miracle. I don't have it on me, but yeah, so there is stuff out there that you can look at towards this. And then if you want to look more towards a more interesting thing, there's obviously the miracles of Lourdes, I guess you could say. It's very Catholic, so but it's interesting stuff to look into if you want to look into reports of miracles. So, yeah.
You got it. Thanks so much. Next up, we need a little more action for Randolph.
Well, I know, that's what I was thinking.
We just got...
Zach's getting all the attention. He's the
I love listening to his voice. You got to get him some questions. He just says such a nice...
Wow. Oh, thank you.
He's a very pleasant fellow, that's for sure. And JMD Apologetics has a question for you. This is the last one. Sorry, folks. I know that some of you asked more than one question. I've tried to skim through to try to get at least everybody's first question in before going to the seconds of others. And
I do have a little more time if both of you do, but it's up to you. You decide.
I hope you can forgive me that if I only do the first question from each person, just because it's been such a long day and I am on the verge of collapse.
It's your show. You decide.
But we would love to have both of you back, because I can tell you people have really enjoyed both of you. And so
great.
It would be our pleasure.
What's the question?
The question is, JMD Apologetics 101, thanks. He says, if nothing is something with no ontological essence or structure or properties in addition or metaphysical characteristics, then how could it cause anything since it has no predictability?
I'm not convinced that predictability would be required. The essence of putting predictability on it would be a constraint or some kind of a rule or condition, and then by saying absolutely nothing is predictable, it is no longer absolutely nothing, but because now you have some way of defining some characteristic of it.
You got it. Thanks so much. And I want to remind everybody the speakers' links are in the description. If you want to check out their content, we highly encourage you to do so. Then you can hear more. Also, want to mention, we constantly, well, sometimes it's funny, YouTube sometimes, at least I'm told, subscribers have told me, like, hey, I didn't get a notification. And I'm like, oh, did you hit the bell? And namely, the bell next to the subscribe button. And they're like, yeah, it's been hit forever, and YouTube just doesn't tell me. So I don't know if it's we'll just say it's a coincidence. Who knows why it happens? But also, YouTube also demonetizes everything we put out, and I have to appeal everything, which means I'm not sure if YouTube. And I mean, like, even if there's no words in the video, YouTube, I think they, for some reason, we've been put on the slightly naughty list. If you want to support this channel, whether you share it or like it, whatever you want to do, that helps us a lot. And we just want to say thanks for those of you who've done it. A lot of people have, and it means so much because we can see the share statistics and things like that. It helps a ton because, like I said, I think YouTube thinks our slightly controversial issues are, I think they just kind of try to tuck us a little bit maybe into the back pocket of YouTube. And so we appreciate your support in whatever way you do that. And we hope you're welcome here, or feel welcome here, as we try to welcome Christians, atheists, and all of the strange creatures in between. So with that, once again, I want to say a final thanks to our speakers just for being here. It's been a pleasure. We really appreciate you guys hanging out with us.
I felt very welcome here. Thank you, Jim. And thank you for organizing this. And Zach, it was just a pleasure meeting with you and the chat beforehand as well. And this whole thing was a fantastic experience. Thank you.
I agree completely, James. It's awesome what you set up, and I thank you for Randolph for coming on such short notice, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you so much.
And one more thing, I have to say, I did enjoy that troll question. I hope next time we'll get a few more of them.
I can't agree more, especially if they are movie related. I'm a huge movie person. So with that, thanks so much for being here. It's been a pleasure, everybody. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. Take care.
Peace.